Welcome to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast AM from the 10th of February, 1998.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening or good morning, as the case may be, across this great land, from the Tahitian and Hawaiian island chains in the west, eastward to the Caribbean and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Good morning in St. Thomas, south into South America, north, all the way to the pole, and worldwide on the internet. This is Coast to Coast AM, and I'm Art Bell. And it is great to be here. This night we have a lot to do, folks, so we're going to talk with Derrel Sims. We heard from Derrel with Dr. Lear. Derrel didn't get to say a lot during the course of that first interview. And Derrel has been prominent in ufology, the hard fact-gathering part of ufology for a long time. And there are his detractors who suggest that he is not what he says he is, and we are going to disprove that tonight. If you go up and you look at Derrel Sims' name on the website, you will find just next to it that you can click on a letter from, let's see, is it the Department of Defense? I think it is. Department of the Army, actually, Office of the Adjutant General, showing the moment when his top secret clearance, which he absolutely had, was converted, replaced, canceled, and replaced with a secret clearance. And that letter is on the website right now. I suggest you take a look, just in case you're curious. He also included a copy of his DD-214, but we're not going to post that. So for Derrel Sims' critics, a moment of hard reality, which he enjoys serving up. All right, now comes Derrel Sims. He has investigated the UFO phenomena for 34 years. Now listen to this. He knew about implants years prior to the surgeries. Derrel is a board-certified hypnotic anesthesiologist. That simply means he's the guy who will put you under if you need surgery by only using hypnosis. He is a master hypnotherapist. That means he teaches and certifies people in hypnotherapy and his specialized training techniques for investigators. He holds certificates in medical hypnotherapy and specialty areas of hypnotherapy. He is a master level at NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming. That's something the Vice President and Tony Robbins are interested in. As a UFO investigator, Derrel has had the distinction of speaking to 250 surgeons and doctors in an AMA-sponsored program of continuing education concerning the topic medical complications of alleged human-alien contact. Derrel is the discoverer of the fluorescence occasionally found on abductees. This and other discoveries have led a number of doctors and scientists to you, most of them on a private basis. Derrel brings to the table with him 3 years as a senior military police officer, a Korean national police officer, as well as under the status of forces agreement. While he was in Korea for a year, he was a volunteer for our country in the U.S. Army. During Vietnam, he was taken out of the U.S. Army and quietly placed in the CIA for a 2-year tour. Derrel worked as a part of the military contingent bodyguard to Vice President Agnew when he came to Korea in the 3 flying bordellos, helicopters, as Derrel called them. He was an escort and guard to Mr. Richard Helms, then director of CIA, of course. Derrel had a top-secret clearance, and now that has been administratively removed to secret. And by the way, for those of you who do not believe that, and Derrel has his detractors, we have posted the letter from the Department of the Army, the actual letter. We scanned it and put it up on the website. If you'll scroll down to Derrel's name and click on it, you will see it. His outstanding credentials have been verified to me prior to the interview. I've got his DD-214, as a matter of fact. He's been on the program before. He was here, as a matter of fact, last week with Dr. Roger Lear. We didn't get to hear from him a lot then. We will tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Derrel Sims. Derrel, welcome to the program.
Hello, Art.
Hi. I was glad to be able to get that up on the website for you to perhaps quiet the roar from some of your critics.
Well, some people find it difficult to believe that, I guess, that someone who was formerly in the Central Intelligence Agency for a couple of years would actually come out and admit it, number one, and two...
Well, that's true, actually. I should ask you about that. How are you able to do that?
Well, quite simply, I didn't really ask to get into the CIA. I was what is called sheep-dipped. Sheep-dipping is something, a term the Central Intelligence Agency, or as they affectionately refer to themselves as the company, they dip into the sheep, which is the military areas, and they pick out what they want, whatever they need.
Thank you for clarifying that. In other words, they find somebody in the military that has some sort of talent, or what did you have that they needed?
That's a real good question. A military gentleman who is also part of the CIA, who was the leader of that particular group, there were three of them, when I was in military police school, and he was the one that interviewed me, and I asked him for a long time, several times, what is it that you're finding here that you're interested in? Because they never would tell us who they were. They only assured us we'd never go to Vietnam and all that, and I said, well, that wasn't the reason I volunteered. The idea was to go to Vietnam. And he never did tell me what the reason was, but I suspect it was red, white, and blue, and that sort of thing, and the testing and the other things they found, of course, they do an extensive background for a top-secret clearance.
Derrel, it sounds like you've got something running in the background, a fan or a motor of some kind. Do you have something?
That's the computer.
It's a computer. All right. Well, it's actually fairly loud compared to your voice, so there it is. Much, much, much better.
Okay.
So there you are in the CIA for 2 years. What ostensibly did you do for them?
Well, a lot of the stuff I did, of course, is still classified, and I can't discuss a lot of that, but I can tell you...
Did you sign an agreement?
Oh, yes. You sign an agreement when you go in. The interesting thing is I was flown on an interesting jet after the after the top-secret clearance was made, and flown to top-secret installation. And in that place, when the clearance finally was done, then I was, of course, awarded a particular rating for this. And then these individuals finally brought me in and explained to me exactly, and several other people, where we were, and smiled after they gave us the briefing and said, welcome to the Central Intelligence Agency, or as you will always refer to it as, the company.
The company.
It was just that simple. So I didn't get to really volunteer because you really didn't know what you were volunteering for.
You cannot tell us where you were.
Not at this time. I intend to. I'm running some things through my attorney currently, and will approach the United States government and see if what I can tell, because I intend to put that in my book, as much as I can of it.
You are writing a book. What is your book going to be called?
The book is entitled Alien Hunter.
Alien
Hunter. Scientific and medical evidence to make a case for abduction.
During your 2 years in the CIA, is it reasonable to ask you, or possible to ask you, whether you were able to, let's see, how can I phrase it? Were you able to confirm any of what you know to be true on the outside now with regard to the visitors?
My tenure with my short tenure with the United States area of the Central Intelligence Agency did not involve any alien phenomena whatsoever. I did find some things that I found quite fascinating, and this is the real thing that I want to pursue with my attorney. and see if I can get that released. I mean, if Marchetti and Frank Agee and others can write some of the things they did that even got people compromised and even killed, Frank Agee did, surely then I can print some of the things that I feel like that the United States people ought to know simply because you're paying taxes for it and you ought to be aware of it.
And what about Philip Corso and many others?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How in the world have they been able to reveal these things without getting slammed behind bars?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think, number one, if you divulge, and this is it's certainly no, I have no intention of slamming anybody here at all, but there are certain things I know that if I speak about, I will be picked up within just a few hours, and it's just that simple. How they do what they do, I don't know, but I know if certain things I relay and cost the government $200 million, I'm going to go to jail.
Going to go to
no
jail.
No question of that.
Mm-hmm. Alien Hunter. Tell me about that. What? Why that title, Alien Hunter?
The title came years ago. A lady did an interview with me, and she smiled. She says, "My goodness," she says, "you look for evidence. You look for the beings. You look for everything about them. You look for the way they think, the way they process, not just the abductees, but the beings themselves." And she wrote an article entitled Alien Hunter, and that stuck, and later I trademarked it.
All right. We did a show with you and Dr. Roger Lear the other night. I should tell everybody that Dr. Lear is a surgeon who removes implants from human beings, and we have electron scanning microscope photographs of those implants on my website right now. They seem to be very, very, very hard evidence of alien presence. Is that the way they hit you?
Well, Mr. Bigelow, when I was called to his location with Roger Lear, when he was going to evaluate in his team of scientists as to whether or not they would fund our research for a period of time, asked the question. He said, if these are evaluated and you find out that they're really alien in origin, what will that tell you?
Yes.
I said, do you mean like if that aliens are really real? And he said, yes. I said, no. I said, that would not be the proof for me. I said, as for the alien presence being real, I said, I figured that out in 1952 when it was standing next to my bed.
I have long since passed the threshold of understanding that we are being visited. You apparently have had more of a visit than I have. What year was that?
1952. When I was 3.5 years old, there was a creature standing next to my bed that, in fact, that literally brought me back from the event. And what was very strange to me in growing up is when I first started seeing these books and things and people's reports about these aliens having these almond-shaped eyes, I was real puzzled by that, and I thought people were probably making that up, because the beings I saw during that time, up until the time that my abduction stopped at age 17, they had very large, round eyes. They were very dark black the same way, but they were very round, which has led me to believe that it's very possible that what I was looking at was a Ford model, and what we have today probably is a Lexus.
Well, that's entirely reasonable, I suppose. What did the rest of the creature look like? You say large, round eyes. They
were exactly the same thing, except that they were not gray or tan, as often people describe them, or off-white. These were the most brilliant white I've ever seen. And it wasn't just when I was asleep, and it wasn't just some situation by which a person could say, well, you were in sleep paralysis and this sort of thing. The fact is that I woke up with the next day with a scoop mark on my leg at 4 years old, and I didn't have any kind of a cut or anything there. It didn't make any sense. And I actually remembered what it was they told me to think that it would be.
What was that?
It was that I'd fallen and cut myself, and that was the reason for that very large scoop on a little child, 4 years old. That's a pretty good size
it is.
Cut.
Was it in the form of a wound, or was it a healed scoop?
It was a completely cauterized wound, much like the ones we're finding with some of the abductees that we're working with, and some of the people that we've actually removed alleged implants from. And what we found in those scoop marks was solar elastosis.
I beg your pardon?
Solar elastosis was what we found from the pathology reports concerning the scoop marks that we've uncovered.
What is that?
Solar elastosis, which confirms a lot of my work with a number of abductees, as to them telling the truth, describing a scoop mark with a scoop with a device that makes a little noise, and it has a light on the end of it and seems to cauterize the wound. Well, that makes a lot of sense whenever you go look at the path report and you find that solar elastosis is there. Solar elastosis means that that area, that scoop mark, that very smooth indentation, has actually been treated to an enormous amount of ultraviolet radiation. Now, what was amazing is the two patients that we used in the surgeries on May 18th, 1996, both of them have very light white skin, and they never go outside. And yet they've been subjected to this solar elastosis only in that one little tiny scoop. Localized
UV radiation.
Yes, sir.
In other words. All right. Derrel, hold on. We'll be right back to you. Derrel Sims is my guest. This is Coast to Coast AM.
Coast to Coast AM from the Kingdom of Nye. Now, once again, here's Art Bell.
Once again, here I am. Derrel Sims, a very interesting guy. I see here he is an advanced open water instructor in scuba. He has a black belt in karate. He's a hypnotherapist. He was a member of the CIA. I've got all of this documentation in front of me. A member of the National Board for Hypnotherapy and Hypnotic Anesthesiology. And it goes on in the American Amateur Karate Federation. I've got all of this documentation in front of me. It's a very diverse background, Derrel. You've done a lot of stuff.
Well, my wife and I both share many of the same interests, and in fact, she was a martial arts student of mine whenever she was a teenager, and she's now a third-degree black belt, and I'm fourth, and we just have identical interest in everything.
Amazing. All right. Well, anyway, back to ufology. All of this began for you when you had your own abduction at 4 years of age. 4 years of age. What has occurred since then to you?
Well, for me, my events ended when I was 17 years old, and they ended very violently.
Oh?
It is not... which may have to do with some of the negative aspect of is what some people refer to it as is a negative.
Well, we were just discussing that with Whitley in the previous hour about whether we should be very careful what we wish for. In other words, whether these beings are really our friends or not. I take it you don't necessarily think so.
I don't. First of all, it's my view that I'm a Christian, and I think that there are all kinds of beings out there, angelic and otherwise, and so on. And I think there are a lot of very good, positive influences there. I think that some of the things that some of these particular beings are doing are, if we had to apply a standard to it, of course, by our own, which I'm sure they don't have, it would be abusive and illegal, immoral. I mean, beings that take you or your children or your wife or anyone out of your home in the middle of the night and rape them and do various things to them, as Whitley well knows from his first experience there, he's reported, is not very emotionally uplifting whenever they do things to a 3.5-year-old child. This is not...
Derrel, what was done to you?
Sir?
What was done to you?
Well, there are a number of things that I'm still getting testing on just to see if I can validate it, because I don't consider my case that that useful because there is not enough physical evidence to meet the standards that I've applied to other people.
I understand.
But for me, I started looking at some neurological testing and other things that indicated to me that the so-called memories that I have are in fact true. Some of the surgical and other procedures that were done, and they were not done for my benefit. And I certainly don't apply this to everyone and say, my goodness, because something pretty rough happened to me, it had to be for you too. I don't apply that to everyone. I can only speak for myself in that regard.
That's fine.
But the last event that I had, you have to understand, this is in about 1964, and in that area.
You would have been 17. Your memories of this should be good.
And well, there was a little evidence in this particular event because the door was actually broken open in the middle of the night, and I couldn't understand why my parents couldn't wake up. The 5 beings that showed up in the room during that time do not show up in any ufology literature I have ever seen. I've found 7 people since then that have seen one of these beings.
Can you describe them?
I could. I'd rather wait, and I'll mention why now. The 7 people that I've found that have met this one particular being have all had horrifying events. One of the people, in fact, is my sister-in-law. After her encounter, she ended up with grand mal epilepsy. And she's not the only person to experience some absolutely horrific experiences from these particular beings.
Oh, my. The news I've been getting lately about these beings is not good. They've done a lot of things they ought not do.
This is very true.
And so I'm beginning to get very concerned as the prospect of contact, real contact, I think is getting very close with all of the daylight sightings and all the rest of it. It's time to start really digging into what we're about to meet here.
Art, I think you couldn't have said a better thing, and I think you're wise to say that. And I think it's foolish for us to welcome anything without knowing. And one of the things that concerns me is, especially when people attack the military. I mean, I was in the military. If I'd have known about horrific things going on that the military was doing or something, I would have been the first person out of the can to expose it. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in there now that would as well. And that doesn't excuse, certainly, intelligence community people that are doing some terrible things.
Well, you remember the movie Independence Day?
Yes.
You remember the crowd that went up on top of the roof there, all the New Agers whooping it up, saying, yes, 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 and of course the ship opened up and fried them all.
Yes.
Is that the kind of first contact we might have?
I don't think so. I'll tell you my thinking, and it's nothing I can prove, but a lot of this is going to come out in the book, and then I'll give you an illustration of this.
Right.
I don't think they're, quote-unquote, going to come to invade or anything like that. I think they're already here.
Oh, so do I.
And I think they already own the place.
Oh,
the problem is,
really?
What are you going to find out? What can you do about it?
They already own the place.
I think they're already here, and they're pretty much doing whatever they want. And it's one of the things that I'm doing in my research, and this doesn't have anything to do with FIRST. It has to do with another corporation I own, Sabre.
All right. Well, you better explain both. What
FIRST
is
the scientific and medical study for the evidence that I've uncovered for 34 years.
All right.
When I brought this brought it to several doctors before, and the one I felt most comfortable with was Dr. Lear. He is a consummate skeptic when it comes to evidence. He is a brilliant man, a wonderful CV, and he had a real problem believing in this implant business when I first brought him. And after, of course, the pathology reports came back, he was ecstatic. But my point being that first is the study of the evidence that I find as the alien hunter, so to speak, looking for evidence. My interest is to find what these beings are doing and why they're here. And I don't think that as human beings that we have the cards to play the game. And until we can get some cards in our hand, we're not going to ever be dealt in. You're just going to get the effect of it.
Do we know what the game is yet?
I don't think so. I certainly don't. I'm working on and hoping through some of the work that I find with abductees that we'll find that, which brings up a tremendous question. When I went down to Brazil, I met a horde of hypnotherapists, and of course they're all saying, well, let me tell you about my cases and what we do and all the stuff we found, and much of the stuff was pretty much the same. And I said, let me ask you a question. Why is it that a lot of the information you're getting is pretty much identical? You pretty much have the same belief systems, yet the information we're getting is different. And then finally they asked me to explain it, and I said, well, you have to understand these beings leave something like a screensaver memory on the memory of the individual. It's kind of like a computer. Your screensaver is not the hard drive memory per se.
Right.
It's not all the data. You have to get past the screensaver. I said, what you're doing is hypnotizing the screensaver, which is an installed, prepared, pre-digested memory for this person, which often is we're here to save the planet, fix the world, clean the ozone hole up, and so on, which they haven't done for at least 6,000 years. And you have to get past that to be able to find out what's actually going on with these beings. That's when you do, you get quite a different story.
All right. When you get past that, there are several things we have to discuss here. One is false memory syndrome.
Oh, absolutely.
I've got to ask you about that.
Absolutely.
There's been an awful lot of TV coverage lately of adults who suddenly have memories of things that never actually occurred, molestations and so forth, things that a lot of people feel are instilled by the hypnotherapist.
Yes.
So address that.
Well, first of all, a false memory syndrome only affects about 10-15% of the population, according to Dr. Charles Latimer in his recent presentations.
Meaning what? That 10 to 15% are subject to?
Are subject to that sort of thing. Now, what I am concerned with, and this may chap some of my colleagues out there in doing hypnotherapy, but one of the things that bothers me about hypnotherapy, the way it's often being done, is that a lot of these people don't understand the nature of hypnosis itself, and they don't understand especially the nature of memory. There's a difference between recall and memory. You can recall a hallucination, but it didn't really occur, you see. There's no physical event that anyone else ever saw.
Okay.
But now, the memory that you recover is something different. In other words, if we're working with you in a situation, which we've done, in a legal situation where you may have witnessed a crime or murder, this sort of thing,
right,
or seen the car and we hypnotize you and get the license plate off of it, that's not false memory syndrome whenever we can trace the person down, put the person in the event.
Of course not.
That's memory. However, if you run up to me and say, oh, I think I saw that you may have seen this murder, you may have seen something and everything, and the hypnotist may hypnotize you and say, well, tell me what it's all about, and they tell you this whopper, you have to know the difference between what these people are going through. Now, some of the difficulties, for instance, the trauma that an individual may have from an event, whether UFO related or not, can induce an installed memory itself to even protect the person. You can have memories installed simply because the suggestions of the hypnotist, he just made errors in his questioning techniques.
Is that installed by the person's own mind as a protective mechanism?
Absolutely, in the cases of trauma. And if the hypnotist is not skilled to know that, he will miss it and pick it up as memory. And I need to really hit this hard in defense of a lot of hypnotists out there. They're doing very fine jobs. The majority of the people are getting sued for this sort of thing, not the majority, all of them I know of, and getting multi-million-dollar suits against them are professional people. Not the hypnotist, but in fact the psychologists and psychiatrists who are leading these people on with this false memory that they're dredging up for these people.
Is that an easy trap to fall into, leading somebody on?
It is, because of the fact that if you have an agenda, let's say that you, and I have a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist who's been begging me to help him with some of his cases, and they are involved in this exact sort of thing. And I assured him that, first of all, I don't even want to look at the cases because they're wrong. Well, one of them is all these people are out molesting these little children. I said, well, who are the people identified? He said, well, it's very obvious, and we got to be careful. I said, who? Well, he mentioned the president and several other people of the country. I said, you mean they're flying out here just to molest these little kids?
Oh,
give me a break. Give me a break. I don't even want to know. Now, this is obvious that someone has done some pretty bad work here. But there again, these are professional people. And it's difficult for me to believe sometimes that some of these people's training is so poor that they don't know the difference between recall and memory.
Well, how do you, for the skeptical public, delineate between the two with respect to the work you're doing?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and it certainly needs to be answered, and I'm glad to. First of all, we never use hypnosis unless the person either, number one, asks for some particular reason for themselves,
okay,
and number two, if there's a certain area that we want to probe and look into after we've already got the person's, they've already gone through all the testing, all the psychological tests, all the IQ testing, and all the other testing that we've agreed to do, which they must do if we take the case. And second, and this is primary, I should say this first, the primary thing is these people that we work with, I only work with physical evidence cases. If you don't have physical evidence, I don't handle the case.
Oh,
so
that's
your
a good start.
evidence
Yeah.
must match what we find.
I've got you. That's a very, very good start.
So I don't have the problem.
Let me try this question out on you. What percentage of the cases that you take on after the physical evidence would you say offer unambiguous proof?
Let me see if I can. Would you phrase that once again for me?
Yes. Of those cases that involve hard evidence that you then go on to use hypnotherapy with, what percentage of those cases at the end of the day would you say are unambiguous, offer proof? Oh,
I would say about 20%.
About 20%?
About 20% of the cases.
Now, what happens if I deduct the 10 to 15% that you suggested might be subject to false memory syndrome?
Well, the most important thing there is the skill of the person. You have to know how to weed that out. You have to be able to spot it. Now, let me give, if I may, a very quick example. My senior investigator, Dale Musser, a very fine investigator, had a lady come in, and this lady is beyond question an abductee. She has been seen by 8 other people on board craft at the same time in a mass abduction of 8 people.
There's
no
people?
Question this lady's an abductee.
8 separate people?
On the same craft, same time, same. It's called the mass abduction event of 1992. It's one of my. It's a case that I'll mention a little later on in this that you'll just absolutely find astounding. But the point is that the lady is no question an abductee, but she also hallucinates, and we know that. She comes in, sits down, says, Dale, I'd like for you to work with me because I've been abducted. He says, okay, have a seat, and he questions her a bit and everything. He's a little dubious.
Uh-oh. That, folks, is the sound of a broken telephone line. These things occasionally occur. Interestingly, these things more frequently occur when we have a guest talking of the kinds of things you're hearing right now. Quite remarkable, I would say. So we'll pick up Derrel on the other side of the news at the top of the hour. Very suspicious. Are you overweight? Well, we can arrange for you to lose 8 to 10 pounds of that weight in the next month. Actually, fiber does that. All fiber that you would eat sweeps fat out of your digestive tract kind of like a broom. Let me tell you about a revolutionary fiber, chitosan. It is natural. It's derived from shellfish. Not only does it sweep out fat, but it absorbs 10 times more fat than any other fiber. You can get this fiber in a formula called ChitoSlim. ChitoSlim is very effective because you lose weight even without changing your eating habits. No stimulants, it's gentle, it's effective, it works. Here's the offer. You order a 90-day supply of ChitoSlim. With it, you get an antioxidant moisturizing cream free of charge. It's guaranteed to work. You can't get it in stores. You can get it here at 1-800-557-4222. 1-800-557-4627. That's 1-800-557-4627. Now, updating you on a story with regard to the Canadian who has won a gold medal and has been disqualified for the use, let me rephrase that, disqualified for testing positive for the use of marijuana, or marijuana present in his system. We're finding now that the claim is that it was secondhand smoke, that he was in the presence of some people that were smoking marijuana. But, you know, again, I want to say, why would marijuana, just as a matter of interest, pharmaceutically, why would marijuana be considered a disqualifier for a gold medal? Most people, I think, in medicine regard marijuana as kind of a lazy drug, that people kind of get laid back. Certainly, it's not regarded as an athletic stimulant or a stimulant for the body. So it seems to me that Canada is really getting screwed here. I was not aware that that a positive test for marijuana would disqualify one for a gold medal. But apparently that has occurred. One more item. I would like to urge everybody to get to my website ASAP. See the photograph we put up there last hour. It is a photograph of an object, an unambiguously clear object in Pensacola, Florida. In addition, we've got the Mexican photographs up there showing a craft passing behind a high-rise building in Mexico City. Now, we are discussing, when we get him back here in a moment, if we get him back, with Derrel Sims, the reality of what's going on, what these creatures are, who they aren't, what they're doing to people, and what we can expect. That's all coming up as we continue with Coast to Coast AM from the high desert. That's exactly what this is. I'm Art Bell. Don't touch that dial. My guest is Derrel Sims, who is a hard evidence UFO investigator. We were, just prior to the top of the hour, cut off. There is no question about that. From time to time, lines are severed. But we have a lock system on this end for guests. And one can only wonder, are these lines tapped? Well, of course they are. Would somebody cut us off? One can't imagine why. Has it happened before? Yes. Did it happen just now? Yes. Now, again, before we proceed with Derrel Sims, who is a alien hunter, who is a hard evidence investigator, let me tell you once again, up on the website by Derrel Sims' name, if you click on it, if you can get up there, you will see a letter from the Department of the Army, Office of the Adjutant General, a U.S. Army Reserve Components Personnel and Administration Center in St. Louis, where all the records are kept. You will see a letter that refers to Derrel Sims' top secret security clearance. He was CIA, and the replacement of that by a secret clearance. So for all of his detractors, we thought we would post this document for you to see. Too many times on radio, you simply are unable to do that kind of thing for a guest, but we make that kind of proactive use of the web. So there it is. For any detractors, be my guest. Go take a look so you know who you're listening to. Once again, Derrel Sims. Derrel, welcome back.
Yes.
We were unceremoniously cut off.
Yes, we were.
Do you believe your phone is tapped?
Oh, I am not a paranoid person. People always ask me if the CIA is watching me all the time and all that, and I said no, they're not, but they were for quite a while for some other reasons. And I suspect that as we get closer and closer to real answers in ufology concerning hard evidence. In other words, out on the private sector, we're getting close to what they already obviously have, and then we don't have to rely upon them and come to our own conclusions and just have to deal with our ridiculous little debunkers and others out here.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to always be paying attention to that, of course.
I frequently wonder when I'm going to be stopped. I keep pushing the envelope, Derrel, to see how far I can go. It's my nature. And I suspect eventually they'll try and stop me. I expect it. Now, getting cut off like that, it's not the first time, and we were in the middle of a fairly sensitive conversation when it occurred. My attitude has always been the phones are tapped. Who cares? I don't say things that I wouldn't say on the air anyway.
Of course. And the ANSA owns the Internet anyway, and anybody who doesn't know that needs to go check it out.
Yeah, I frequently recommend to my listeners, Derrel, the NSA has supercomputers listening to lots and lots of phone conversations, looking for keywords. And when they hear those keywords, or when those keywords are said and noted, then conversations are indeed listened to by the NSA. That's pretty well known in the intelligence community. So I frequently urge my listeners to, in the middle of a conversation, for no other reason, just drop in a word like kilo.
That ought to get them confused.
Yeah, it does the trick, believe me. Anyway, we now have you back. And I sure would like to hear that story about the mass abduction of 8 people, unrelated apparently.
Oh, that is a big one.
Okay.
Art, you have struck the chord that got me the title Alien Hunter. The lady was investigating a case we refer to as the mass abduction event of December 8th, 1992. And let me back up just a little bit. I came to one of my abductees. I had about 75 at the time. And she is what we would refer to generally really as a contactee. She believes that her events, even though some of them may have been somewhat negative, that the guys are basically here helping us, doing something good, but she doesn't know what it is. And so I said, what I would like to do is to do an experiment. I said I was in the Central Intelligence Agency for 2 years and worked in the military police and so on. And so with that background, I said what I would like to do is install a post-hypnotic suggestion, installing in your memory a piece of information that I found that I think that if it is valid would upset them if they knew you knew it. And I said probably nothing will happen, but if it does, I would like to see if anything would occur.
Now, let me get this straight. This is somebody who's an ongoing abductee or contactee.
Absolutely.
And you're implanting a post-hypnotic suggestion.
My own screensaver memory.
To send to them.
Absolutely.
Oh, I've always wondered when somebody would do that.
Well, Art, this is, to me, made sense. We did 3 years of research, Dale Musser and myself, my senior investigator, and after we gathered the evidence together, we did not hopscotch off of everyone else's work. We took our own 75 people and came up with our own incredible stats of up to 33% of these abductees having rare drug allergies, which only 0.08% of the population has.
Really?
It's equivalent to 3 out of every 10 astronauts that walk in having a rare drug allergy of the same exact kind. It's never going to happen. In fact, your dentist will laugh at you if you even mention it to him.
Mm-hmm.
But we found a lot of stats like that. We found the fluorescence on these people immediately after their abduction scenarios.
Fluorescence?
Yes, fluorescence that permeates the skin on contact, and it will stay there. It won't wash off. You can't get it off. The only way we can even get a sample is to take a surgical scalpel and cut very lightly into the skin and take a shaving of the skin off. And we've actually, in fact, I got my first analysis in today. We found 2 of them that were identical.
Fluorescence. What is the material made up of?
It's a fluorophore that it's not a phosphorescent thing. It's a fluorophore that will only light up under the excitation of or the use of a black light brought next to it.
Uh-huh.
And what this basically means, we think, we can't prove this, of course, but we think what it means is that the individual in their abduction scenario has been touched by these beings, and there seems to be an exuding of some kind of fluid, like an oil or something, that penetrates the skin on contact. and it literally colors the skin with a fluorescence.
Wow. Wow.
I've had several professors,
now,
everyone would recognize them out there, ask about it, and they're very excited, from England to the U.S.
Derrel, there are some seaborne biological creatures that exhibit that kind of fluorescence as well.
Yes.
For example, under certain conditions, jellyfish do.
Yes.
Is there some relationship to that kind of fluorescence?
We've not found that out at this time. What we're doing right now is taking 22 samples that we do have from abductees and testing them. We have a biochemist, Evelyn, that does our work for us, and she is struggling, as we all are, because of the lack of funding to be able to really get out there and do what we need to be doing. But in this case, to touch a little bit on the fluorescence and how I found it, one of the things that we found about cattle mutilations many years ago, it was reported that some of the cattle had fluoresced when someone accidentally got a black light near them. And then some of the cattle that later fluoresced apparently were mutilated, which indicated that, if this story is true, that they in fact were marked. Well, that's not how I found the fluorescence. How I found the fluorescence, and this will be real good for our detractors and debunkers and attackers of hypnosis. I found the first fluorescence finding from a young man who regressed back to the age 5 to his first event, and he kept crying because he said, they don't like me. He said, I'm doing everything they want me to do, and they kept crying and crying about why he just couldn't understand why they didn't like him. And the funny thing about it was, for me, was that his father had painted a beautiful black light picture all over his wall as a child. Mm-hmm. And he had a little black light there next to his bed because the kid was always afraid and he couldn't understand why. Of course, aliens coming in your room at night picking you up, it might illustrate that.
That'll do it.
And then one night the beings came through the wall, woke the little boy up, and the little boy was terribly frightened, and he looked, and the black light, of course, was on, was lighting up the black light wall with the picture that his father had painted.
Right.
But he saw a brilliant, bright green fluorescence in places on those beings, white skin.
What would that suggest to you, or does it suggest at this point anything yet?
Well, we can only guess, and of course this is why we have Evelyn doing the testing so that we can find out.
Right.
But it would seem to me, based on the evidence I have to date, that whenever these beings touch a person, that this liquefied or semi-liquid form material that penetrates our skin on contact seems to be exuded from them, like something like sweat or something. And what's amazing about this is I've found a number of different colors, and the colors correspond to exact abductee reports and the different reports. And this is just absolutely, it was a thrilling find as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
And because, it verifies the abductees are telling the truth. These people don't go out and make this stuff. They just sit there and lie. It's easy to catch people lying this way.
Again, the 8.
There we go into the 8. The 8 people, what happened, the lady received the post-hypnotic suggestion. She looked at me and she said, I'm going to tell you something, Derrel. She said, I trust you implicitly. I like these beings. I don't like what they're doing. I think it's wrong. I think this thing's going to come to a conflict eventually between you and whoever they are. She said, so I'll do whatever you want. I said, well, I have to do this on video. And she says, why is that? And I said, because I'm fixing to induce amnesia. You're not going to remember anything.
Amnesia.
So when I installed the post-hypnotic suggestion of information that I felt, and let me back up here a bit.
Sure.
Since I was in the intelligence community, there are two things that you did in the intelligence community. One is the intelligence community's job is to have secrets. And the second reason for them having secrets is not to ever have them exposed because you become vulnerable.
Of course.
I mean, that's the whole point. I don't think the alien presence is any different. So the best way to do this is to test it. So I found information from one abductee that I felt was, if I were them, I would not want that out. I got way past the screensaver memory, in other words, and found one of these type scenarios that sounded to me like it might be true.
Okay, so you had second level information from an abductee.
So the question is, who knows whether it's true or not? Let's apply it in the situation and see what happens.
So you hypnotize this lady, and you implanted
the information, and then installed amnesia in two ways. I installed amnesia on both sides of her memory. Because if the being catches her, the very first thing they're going to do, they've already abducted her since she was 3 years old. They know everything that woman ever thinks.
Right.
They know everything. So if she has information about them that is would be harmful, in my opinion, the particular information, if they found that, then it should cause some kind of reaction.
Well, when you say on both sides of her memory, what do you mean?
By that I mean whenever she can't remember. I can't allow her to remember what's going to happen, because if she does that, they're going to catch that instantaneously.
So that means
they know there's a trap.
That means no memory prior to the event and no memory after the event.
Correct.
Okay.
So whenever they get her, if in fact the information is valid, which this is all hypothesis on my point, I have no idea whether it is or not. The important thing I want to do is install a block on the other side, just like they do us.
I understand.
So that they can't find out who gave it to her.
So you're sending a message to them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, she later moves to Florida, and a remarkable situation. That'll all come out in the book. She's one of my 7 cases I'm going to review.
Right.
And you can see here why. So she gets picked up about 2 weeks later. Remarkable situation. The post-hypnotic suggestion does not work until she gets within 20 inches of the being. I set it to go off when she's right next to him. And when she got within 20 inches of him, she woke up completely out of her trance and looks at him completely wide-eyed, and then she spouts out the information. And he was upset. Well, now, of course, we did not know this at all because this was in November. And then on December 8th, 1992, apparently things got worse, and I guess it goes up the food chain.
Can you relate what the information was?
I can't at this time because I intend to do it again.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
I intend to do it again.
You had specific inside information about them. She was abducted. The moment came, she awoke and gave them this information.
I went ahead and abducted her anyway, took her to whatever procedures they did with her, and apparently it went on up the food chain, because now I'm backtracking because we already have the rest of the information.
I would imagine there would be repercussions for you.
Well, that would have to be my detractors. That's something I can think. I've often thought most of those people are aliens anyway. No. Just kidding. At least in some sense of the word. Very strange. The situation went on that on December 8th, 1992, my senior investigator and I were talking, Dale, and he looked at his fingernails and he noticed that they had started to grow over the last day or so very rapidly. And he got freaked out, because one of the things I've found with some of these people, not all of them, but some of them, is their hair growth and fingernail growth is remarkable during the abductions, only on some of these people. In his case, it's fingernails. He's having to trim his fingernails 2 and 3 times a day. That's per day.
My.
So he looks at his fingernails and says, oh, my God, something's happened. He said, regress me, let's see what's happened. And he starts describing the most bizarre situation I've ever heard of how 8 of these people, including this lady, of course, now, if this, now you can back up and see the story, she was the one that we used as the bait. And if you weren't going to abduct me, who would you get to get the information from? But my senior investigator, because he would ostensibly know everything that I know.
Did these 8 people know each other?
They did know each other, and one of them was in Florida at the time, and the others were in several different cities around Houston. They were our abductees, and it is my opinion, based on everything we've seen since then, that the idea was to find out where the leak was, that's what we would do if we were in an intelligence community situation.
So, in other words, really, you're almost back in the CIA. I mean, this is intelligence.
I don't see what the
counterintelligence. I don't either. But I would be very concerned that their mental capabilities or dealing with her mental state would be better than your ability to. I can see how you really get in trouble. All right, stay right where you are. Derrel Sims is my guest. This is Coast to Coast AM.
Now, here again is Art.
Once again, here I am. What we are hearing right now virtually is a description of the Manchurian Candidate. A lady repeatedly abducted, and then finally, Derrel Sims coming along, an expert hypnotherapist, inducing a memory in her with a message to be delivered to them. Manchurian Candidate all the way. Back now to Derrel Sims. Derrel, that's just like the Manchurian Candidate.
Yes, sir. The situation got even better.
Okay.
As we began to find out who was involved, as soon as we found out there were at least 8 people involved, 8 of our people, and there were several other people from other places. We still not found them yet. What we found is that immediately they sectioned 6 of them off for whatever they were going to do with them, and then they took my senior investigator and they questioned him. There are 2 beings that came on board that craft that are apparently quite high up. The other little grays, and I call them cosmic skinheads, the grays and the browns, the doctor types, as you often know about.
Yes.
And you ask about implants, I can tell you about that very well because I have a conscious memory of getting mine when I was 14. And there was, in fact, in most of these cases where these people say, you know, I don't know what happened and it was okay and it was wonderful. Whenever I hypnotize these people, if we use this type of technique to get this type of memory, and you put this on video and they look at it, they were absolutely scared out of their mind.
I'm sure that's true.
Because these beings do not use any form of anesthetic, but they tell you that they did.
Well, all right. Your chief investigator, what? Roll over that again, please.
He gets taken by one of the 2 higher up beings that are there, and in his event, he is questioned at great length, and they produce a holographic image in his thinking of a human brain, and they show it to him and ask him where this being asks him where the human subconscious is.
My God.
Now, why in the world would they ask that if they already knew? And when he said, well, you know, he's very methodical and very scientific, he tries to give him a reasonable answer, and the being gets very upset, to say the very least. A Nordic, which is some people refer to as a human being, type being of this group, walks over and grabs Dale's head and holds it between his fingers, his hands,
yes,
looks very closely, face to face with him, and looks back at the being sitting there and says, he's telling the truth. He doesn't know. And the story just gets more bizarre. An amazing thing happens during this time, and to give a little background on Dale, Linda Moulton Howe interviewed Dale once, and she says, in her opinion, that Dale is one of the clearest-headed people she's ever met in her entire life. He can clearly tell the difference between his emotional state and the events that occur. And this is the kind of qualifications that my senior investigator has in the eyes of someone like Linda Moulton Howe, if that carries any weight with anyone else. So he's very, very clear. He does not make things up or add to anything. He also, if the being asked him right off the bat, he wanted to know why I did what I did.
I bet.
And he wanted to know why we were meeting. Now, that was amazing to me that they had an interest in that. And we found that out in several different ways as well. The lady, on the other hand, is in another room meeting with another being of ilk, and because there seems to be a very militaristic infrastructure in this stuff, and the grays and browns that some of these people seem to like so well are actually on the lowest end of the food chain. They're not even treated well.
Are they full biological creatures? I'm not even sure about that.
I gave a post-hypnotic suggestion to another one of the 8 people who's there. Later, wanted a post-hypnotic suggestion to protect herself and her 2 children, and so I did give her one under those conditions, and she actually assaulted the being that came in and tore his eye cup off.
Oh, I really think you're messing around with some pretty scary stuff here.
Well, I think they shouldn't have been messing around with somebody 4 years old.
I agree with you. Listen to this fact. Art, your guest is accurate all the way regarding the decoding of the screen memories. To get to the truth, please ask Derrel if he's familiar with the latest scientific proof put forth in the book called The Threat by David Jacobs, Ph.D. The information in the book describes exactly what your guest is saying, and it is an understatement when I say it is frightening.
Well, first of all, I know David Jacobs. I met him for the first time in Brazil, and I was sitting in a bar. I don't drink, but I do socialize. And I was sitting there, and David had his book, and I read through a little of it, not much, because I didn't have the time, and I certainly didn't want to insult him by sitting there reading his book when I should be out buying it, because it's a very good book.
Yes.
I know David Jacobs from that, and he watched my presentation, which dealt with the implant phenomena and a bunch of other physical evidence, of which I have videotapes at the end of this program I'd love to mention. One of them called The Best Evidence Interview. It's 2 tapes, and it's just chock full of evidence you haven't even heard of.
Oh, you can mention it right now. You've got 2 videotapes?
Oh, yes. Let me just touch this very briefly.
All right.
Let me give my phone number and everything so everybody can call.
Be careful about...
It's a voicemail.
Wait. It's voicemail.
It's a voicemail.
All right.
I've done this before.
All right.
It's a voicemail, and if they call the voicemail, they'll actually get my actual home phone number or office number, and then they can call from there if they have an interest beyond that, but everything they need will be on this voicemail.
Okay.
The voicemail is 281-587-5455.
And
That's
from there...
281-587
Right.
5455.
281-587-5455, and from there they can get your office.
They will get They will hear a message on there that'll tell them everything they need to know about the videotapes that we have that are available, and primarily as something I would love for everyone to get, which is an implant and abduction information collection that I have, which is based on the book that I'm writing. In other words, you can get a lot of this advanced information now.
Well, from what I've heard so far, it seems to me that you would be regarded as a threat.
Well, let me go a little further in the story and tell you why I believe the story, not because I hypnotized 8 people independently and separated them, and they all told the identical stories. The only thing different in their stories was they were all offered, I say offered, not given, offered a screen memory of their choice. One lady wanted to see her deceased brother, and she described him beautifully, except he had large black eyes.
Derrel, if these creatures have the ability to tamper with our minds in this manner, what defense do we have? Well,
when I was about 4 years old in the first event, I learned a lot. As a child, I was I don't know if it was rebellious or what, but when the being was standing next to my bed, I had this propensity to wake up at the wrong time. I woke up in an OR one time. I was the patient in this case, and I got up off a general anesthetic, got up and walked over and talked to another surgeon who was there and asked him why he was doing what he was doing there. The surgeon had actually subbed his work out to another surgeon, and I wanted to know why. So I have a propensity to wake up in the wrong times in trance. And
yes.
This being, when he brought me back, I was lying on the bed as 4 years old. I can describe the event with incredible detail because I have conscious memory of it. I've never had hypnosis for any of my events. I remember much of my events consciously. I was not paralyzed. I was not in a state of sleep paralysis or any stupid thing like that. I know the difference. I've had sleep paralysis. I know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not paralyzed at the time. The being was just standing there. He wasn't doing anything. He had large black eyes. We had a light on our well house out in the back at 1005 South K Street, Midland, Texas. I know exactly where I lived. I knew every rock on that lot. And this being stood there, and at that point, I was very frightened by looking at him, and it looked at me with these large round black eyes, not the almond ones.
Yes.
And he began, at that point, induced a paralysis. And I became so frightened, I pushed so hard against the wall, I fell, pushed the bed apart from the wall, and fell on the floor. My little rear end was up, and legs were on the bed, and my head and shoulders were on the floor. And he lifted up the covers on the other side of the bed and looked under the bed and looked at me, and those large black eyes programmed an image of a clown. Now you wonder why so many abductees have clown phobias, and they don't know why.
Well, again, I say, any being that can do what these beings can do to us mentally, aside from somebody like yourself working for our side, what hope do we have?
Well, even as a 4-year-old, I had an ability I didn't know, and it's called resistance. And what happened is I would not allow him to do that. As he changed his image to me to look like a clown, his image kept changing back to what he really looked like, because I wanted to remember him for what he was.
Mm.
And I have never been deceived by the image of something else they've programmed.
What do they want with us?
Lord have mercy. I have no idea. I mean, I wished I had all the wonderful answers in the world that, and some of my detractors seem to think I have those. I do not. I wished I did. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
What's your best guess?
Well, I have 6 reasons why I think they may be picking us up. And I can't prove this, and there may be 100 reasons, but there seem to be at least 6.
Right.
One of the reasons, and I'll give them in 3 sets of 2s. The first is science and technical. When I spoke to Pat Parnello, he's the gentleman that we did the surgery on his hand.
Yes.
And took the implant out.
Yes.
Wonderful man. I told him there's something different about you, and he looked at me. He's a very kind and a very good gentleman, and would not brag on himself at all. And he said, "There's nothing different about me." I said, "Oh, yes, there is." I said, "You feed that to somebody else." I said, "You're so different." I said, "I promise you, they're after you for a reason." I said, "It's science or technical, and I suspect that's where you're at." And he said, "But I'm not a scientist, and I'm not this." And I said, "I don't care." I said, and then he sat down and showed me some of the most incredible technical stuff I ever saw.
Okay.
For hours. So science and technical, but they're not interested in your skill. They don't care if you have a 2 or 3 PhDs in science. That's not what they're after.
What are they after?
They're after the way you process science and technical data. You seem to process differently than other people, and Pat is a beautiful example of it.
All right.
My senior investigator is a beautiful example of it.
All right. No, that makes sense. They would already know what we know,
They already know
the
it.
way
They don't
we
need
process it, that makes
But they're
sense.
interested in the way you process. You
Gotcha.
process something different than they do,
Gotcha.
than other people. You're not necessarily smarter or anything like that. I don't say that at all. The second group of 2 things seems to be spiritual and psychical. And in this, they're not after Billy Graham. They don't want the brilliant and top people in the spiritual things, or the top psychics in the world, Gene Dixon or something like that. They're not interested. They're interested in how you process, as if they're looking for a neural level of how you do differently than any other person. And in the third level has to do with physiological or psychological learning abilities, in which you're either not taught anything or you're taught very little. Now, when I presented this theory at Bob Brown's conference years ago, Dr. Carla Turner, a dear friend of mine, was sitting out there with her husband, Elton, and they were listening to this, and a lady stood up in the middle of, one of my detractors actually stood up in the middle of the conference and just shouted. She says, "Prove it." And I told her that I said I fit in the last 2 categories.
Which are?
the physiological and psychological learning with very little training or no training.
Mm-hmm.
She said, prove it. And I said, well, young lady, I said, I have at the time, a third-degree black belt in Japanese karate. She says, a lot of people have that. I said, well, this is not like some systems where you can order your belt in advance. I said, lady, I said, this is something you have to earn. It's about like a 4-year education.
Yes.
And she says, so, a lot of people have that. And I said, yes, but they probably had a teacher. I said, go try to get a third-degree black belt in Shotokan karate anywhere.
All of this was done without...
On my own.
On your own. So, in other words, you have ways, you have learning abilities at some level, not necessarily with an IQ of 600.
It has nothing to do with how smart you are. It has to do with the way you process.
The way you process.
That's all it is.
All right.
It's not anyone being more intelligent than anyone. And I just listed a host of things, and finally this lady got real ticked off, and finally I told her something else. I said, the next thing I'm going to tell you, sugar, I said, is I taught myself how to walk over broken glass and fire in a martial art demonstration at New Mexico State University for the associated students with 250 people present, and it's on film. I said, I'll be glad to show it to you if you'd like. I said, in that particular demonstration, I'm transferring my ability to another person. I'm a white belt at the time, and he's a black belt. I said, that's all on film if you want to watch it. And I said, now I have a question for you, young lady.
Do you have all this on your videotapes?
Oh, yes. Well, she says, what's the question? And I said, how would you like to play? I said, we can do this with you, too. Well, boy, she backed off real fast.
I understand that.
But the point is that those are 6 things that seem to me, they seem to be interested in. There may be 100.
What about the genetic and reproductive angles?
Oh, you really hit a major chord here. Let me just touch on that. And this gets a little scary. Most people think that they're here to, quote unquote, they've improved this and they've done this, or they've even made us. I don't think that's the case at all.
Okay.
There's an ancient saying in the Bible that says you were created wonderfully. When you study that, you find out that in every biological sense and every mental sense that we are an incredible creation. Well, the amazing thing about that is that when you find that you have 15 billion neurons and 150,000 miles of neural network inside your head, most of which you probably never use in your entire life, probably don't use over a few hundred feet of it. If you don't use your brain, somebody's going to probably do it for you. Governments will, dictators will, and so will other beings from other places.
And Derrel Sims.
Well, the interesting thing about this is in the breeding program, some people, if you look at the breeding program that's going on and what's going on in ancient times from ancient literature, according to Sitchin, they basically bred people to be slaves. I mean, that's not a very high ideal for mankind, even if that were true.
That is indeed what he believes.
That's exactly what the man says. So it seems that, according to him and some other people, they seem to be breeding us up. My view is that we better be looking at it a little differently. They may not be breeding us up, they may be breeding themselves up, or they may be breeding us down or out.
Or using us to refresh their genetic pool.
If that is the case. But the point is they're doing something, and they will not tell you what it is. And I'll tell you a major thing I am very concerned about. I'm real concerned about the easy stuff that hypnotists and others are finding. It's just too easy. It's the stuff that's behind that's what you better be looking for. And I'll even give them a great hint. After you hear everything, and this is what I did with the lady on the mass abduction. She was the last one that I interviewed out of the 8.
Right.
And I asked the question. I said, is there anything else that you saw, you sensed, you heard in any way that you can tell me, anything that I've missed? And she said, no, you got everything. We've been there for hours. Mm-hmm. I said, okay. I said, I want to ask you one last question. She said, okay. I said, is there anything that you're not supposed to tell me? And she stayed for an hour and a half and described my last abduction event of when I was 17 years old. She described all 5 of those beings. They're not listed in the literature anywhere. She described them in detail.
So then
she described what they did, everything.
They sent this back to you?
No, she overheard it on the craft. That was her interpretation. Well, she does not know to this day whether she was right or correct, because I never did tell her. But I'll tell you one thing, she stood the hair up on the back of my neck.
Yeah, you seem to keep an awful lot of this very close to the vest. All right, Derrel, hold on. When we get back, we are going to take phone calls from a physician in the audience. Art, I hope that all out there, including MDS, psychiatrists et al., and psychologists, are listening very carefully. And there is more involved here than contacts that are transformative and designed to raise our consciousness. This is serious business, and it deserves the skills and serious evaluation that Derrel Sims and others of his caliber offer. Serious business indeed. Can you imagine sending a message to them? It's something I've wondered about for years. When we get back, we are going to open the phone lines. Derrel Sims is an expert in abduction and hard evidence. If you want or have something to say to him, now's the time. This is Coast to Coast AM.
This is Coast to Coast AM from the Kingdom of Nye.
It is, and here I am again. Derrel Sims is my guest, and I'll tell you the kind of responses I'm getting on the phone. I screened the first few calls, which we do when we have a guest. I said, do you have a question for Derrel Sims? First response was, I sure as hell do. So I guess we've got something coming up here. Derrel Sims, a guy off into some pretty frightening areas with regard to ETs. Very frightening areas, actually. Here he is once again. Derrel, are you there?
Yes.
All right, good. Our phone connection seems to be holding up. Let's go to the phone line, see what we get. All right?
Very good.
All right, here we go. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, guys. You connected with New Jersey. Kathy here.
Hi, Kathy.
All right, I have a daughter, 23 years old, who was born with what's called microcephaly. It's smallness of the brain. I was always told that she wasn't going to walk or talk or do anything of the sorts and to put her away, and I never did. And she's not a genius, but she's doing pretty good. Around age 11, I got the scare of my life, and I never forgot it. But not being able to communicate with a child like this, how the hell am I going to find out if what I saw was true? She was always afraid of going into the bed, so she slept on the couch like a lot of kids do till around age 10 and a half. I looked out in the hallway, which is about a good 30 feet from where I was sleeping, and I saw what you guys call a regular gray. Those eyes looked at me. I could not get up out of the bed, but I looked at it and I said, get the hell away from her. And with my eye contact, it did leave. She changed from that night on. She went to sleep in the bed. But for 1 solid year, she would not take her shoes or socks off without going into a tantrum. Her attitude changed about a year. That year later, she got violent tantrums. She still to this day is very irritable. She draws pictures. She sees things on TV, and when she does see these people that look like this, she smiles. She does. I say, are you afraid of them? She says, no. That I can contact, but I have this weird feeling that I really should find out what happened. It's left us very uncomfortable.
Derrel?
I totally agree with you that you should find out what happened, and I don't mean to imply to others out there. I have very many friends who are quote unquote contactees, and I don't mean to offend anyone if they. I mean, just because my events were different and others may have been radically different, I certainly don't mean to indicate that. There are people who even have apparently been better off physically from some of their events as a result of their contacts. We have a lot more cases of where that was not the case. Bob Pratt, in his wonderful book, UFO Danger Zone, 30 years of work that he did, and of contacts that have been going on in Brazil, in the Amazon region, that have absolutely devastated those people. We know of one case where the man's eyes were surgically removed, a case I'm working on now in Brazil.
What do you recommend to this lady?
I recommend that she find somebody, and I'm very careful here.
Yeah.
You find somebody that has skills that can do, that number one, that understands the physical condition of the person involved, and through a doctor or a neurologist or whoever would be, and have them deal with that along that line. I think that it would be wise to find out what actually happened, and I mean, it's rather interesting that there's two separate views here. The girl has a view that they're okay, and you have a view that
I don't think
something
okay
else is there, something a little frightening. Calvin Parker and his friend had two separate views when they came off the craft too. One of them thought he had practically seen the face of God, and the other one came out with himself cut to pieces, literally.
The opposite. Yeah, that's
so,
the way I feel.
In my view, you should find somebody in the kindest way. When it comes to my brain or my head, somebody's going to be working on, they're going to be the best, or they're not going to be doing anything for me.
You bet. Well, I'll be trying to leave you some voicemail very soon.
Right.
Please let me give you my
Be careful.
Yeah, not my regular phone, just my. You can contact me by email at Derrel@Holman.net. That's DERREL.
Okay.
At Holman, HOLMAN.net. That's Derrel@Holman.net.
All right. All right.
And, because there is more, and I just don't. I
know if you will contact me there, I will be glad to spend enormous time with you and help you and try to get you someone or assist in any way I can. I'm very interested in making sure that you get the help that you want.
Yeah, because there is a communicative problem here.
I
believe
me, I understand that.
Yeah.
All right.
I do.
Thank you very much, and good luck to you. Here's the facts, Derrel. My question for Derrel is this. Since he said he was a Christian during the beginning of the interview, has he ever considered that these creatures, in quotes, are of a demonic nature, may be perpetuating the story to satisfy their own end means?
Well, that's entirely possible. I have to address this two ways. Number one, I am a Christian, and I hope a pretty good Bible student, have been for many years, and am very interested in that and fascinated with it. The second area I have to address is the fact I'm also an investigator. Investigator does just that. They find evidence. They don't come to conclusions and then go looking for it. They find evidence.
That's what I'm doing. Right, all right. But along that line then, from Hawaii, the following. With the aliens possessing such advanced technical capabilities, wouldn't it be rather easy for them to create a false memory that we would be unable to unlock, even with hypnosis and regression, and that, in fact, the information Mr. Sims is bringing forth might just as likely be planted?
Well, this is entirely possible. One of the things that was rather amusing in the mass abduction event is I had given Dale a post-hypnotic suggestion as well, that if he ever came into contact with one of these beings to take control of him the same way they do us, and he did. And it was amazing to me that the beings that were present, giving the being instructions to get Dale out of the area, the being couldn't do it, and the being was just shaking because Dale was giving it commands mentally the same way that they give them to us. That suggests to me that the neurology of the beings, especially the smaller ones, seems to be very simplistic and very easy to maneuver. The beings themselves, in my opinion, just based on what I'm finding, seems to have an enormous hierarchy. The ones that we normally come into contact with and see are really low end of the food chain. There's no question of that. But to address back in the other direction for this other guy's question and for this person, there are a few cases where angelic beings apparently, or at least reportedly, and I have to use that term reported because we don't know, reportedly show up on occasion. This is usually pretty rare. when you hear these stories. But in cases where that has occurred, the alien presence, regardless of their rank or ability or whatever they are, they hightail it. Now that, to me, signals some real interesting things if the story is true.
It does, if it is. Hello, Art. Ask Derrel about means of protection against these beings. There has to be a way. Let's not portray humans as totally defenseless. I don't think you've done that. You pointed out that they do have weak points. What is a good defense?
Well, there are resistance techniques that Andruffel and others have worked on, and others, and I'm working with a group of people now to explore this, because it's important for me to be able to offer somebody, if they feel like they need defense techniques, to do just that.
I've also heard that they are not physically strong. I've heard reports from a number of abduction cases, including Travis Walton, for example, where these beings have been punched or pushed, and were punched and pushed very easily.
This is true. I can tell you that from my own experience. One of the things that one can do, and I'm going to give a list of them, and of course these are, as I said, I'm a Christian, and I have ideas that I feel that are valid, and certainly want to see those tested out there in the realm as well if it's going to happen. By the same token, there are other people who have made suggestions that I feel that should be exploited as well, and to see what works. Some of them in existing here is some people have actually used prayer, and some of these, I have to admit, are not Christians. One lady who was a Buddhist priest told me she used the name Jesus, and I asked her, I said, why are you using a resistance technique of the name of Jesus to, you are Buddhist? And she says, well, I may be Buddhist, but I'm not stupid. So I appreciated her statement. I mean, whatever works, that's fine for me.
That's right.
And some people use visualization with white light surrounding them and so on. Some people actually use spiritual and mental techniques. I use post-hypnotic suggestions because they're effective.
So it's entirely possible, Derrel, this whole thing is spiritual in nature.
That's entirely possible.
All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hello?
Hi, is it my turn?
It's your turn. Where are you?
I'm in Denver.
Okay, you're going to have to yell at us a little bit. You're not too loud.
Okay, I'm just a little bit nervous. I've had things happen to me, and it's caused me at times to question my sanity, and at other times it seems very real to me, and so I'm kind of torn. I know that I'm given to dramatics, but there are just things that have happened to me that make me think maybe there's something deeper to this.
What kind of things?
The most recent happenings are I will lie down at night to go to bed. This has happened twice. I'll lie down to go to bed, and I'll just be closing my eyes to drift off, and there will be a really brilliant flash of light. And I open my eyes, and it's dark, and I go to sleep. And then I have what I've come to call teaching dreams. And I wake up without any memory of what I was taught. But the one that stands out most clearly is just before I came to out of the dream, there was a being. I couldn't see a face. It's a voice that I heard inside my head. I don't know if it was male or female, saying, "We'll come back and we will talk to you at about 6 o'clock in the morning." I think it was. They gave a time in the future. So that's happened. I've had dreams of like almost an invasion force with the spaceships and stuff, which could be anything. It could be watching too much X-Files, only to find that 3 or 4 people the next day that I come in contact with have had almost identical dreams, and that's a little blood-chilling.
Oh, that's very chilling. Derrel, mass dreams, similar dreams, typical?
Many times when they pick up people in an area, they'll pick up several, and sometimes they'll install the same usually end-of-the-world scenarios. In my case, when I was quite young, they gave me an end-of-the-world scenario, and I was standing there in the midst of a red sky. I mean, it was people running, screaming insanely, and I'm standing there wondering what's going on here. The fact is, if you could shake yourself right then, you'll find that if you're in the craft or wherever it is they take you, that there is no end of the world or anything. That, in fact, that's all a surrealistic image given by them, and you'll find them standing there watching you.
Projected for what purpose?
That's a real good question. I don't know. I don't know, but I don't like it.
Except for the physical evidence that you continue to uncover, it all fits into almost a spiritual war going on.
That seems to be the case from a number of things. I have some questions I ask people who take the opposite view, and I've never been able to get an answer from them yet. And I'll go into that in a moment, because undoubtedly we'll get one on the phone here in a minute, and I'll ask them.
All right.
We'll work it that way.
All right. First-time caller line. You're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Hi, Art. Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Todd. I'm calling from Fort Hood, Texas. You probably know where that is.
I sure do.
Okay. I'm assigned to an organization called INSCOM. Do you know what that means?
What is it?
Intelligence and Security Command?
Yes.
Be the old Army Security Agency?
Yes.
I'm what they call a 98 kilo, if you know what that means.
Okay.
And basically my job, without going into a lot of detail, is we listen to everything.
Yes.
And this event, the question is, have you ever encountered any of this when you were on active duty?
I did not encounter anything directly. What I did do while I was in the Central Intelligence Agency was investigate several UFO events that occurred, and I found out some other information indirectly that I want to get permission to be able to publish it.
Good luck.
Because I think that it will tie into it, but I didn't have direct contact myself. What did happen in the Houston UFO Network meeting several years ago is a gentleman came and visited the meeting. There were three of us speaking. I was speaking that night on implants. This was years before when no one even knew what an implant was at that point, as far as aliens were concerned. And I was speaking on implants that night, what I thought we would find. And this gentleman wrote me a letter afterward. And he identified himself as being in the Central Intelligence Agency. He identified himself in an area very similar to where you're at. He watched traffic come across his desk, and he saw something one day that absolutely frightened him. And he told me about it. Now, I didn't particularly necessarily believe his story, nor him claiming this ability or this having this information, until he identified certain things that I knew that only agency people would know. Well, one of the things I found rather interesting is he told me about something that was going to occur, and two things. He said, number one, he said, the area you're in the area of implants, he said, you need to exploit as quickly as you can. He said, you're there. And I thought that was rather interesting. This was years before we did any surgeries. Number two, he told me of an event that was going to occur involving a zombie-like person. And I thought, well, this is real. This has got to be the farthest out thing I've ever heard. And shortly after that, he sent me an article shortly after he predicted this, and he just said, it begins. And it showed an article from the FBI of a person in a zombie-like state robbing banks. He used no gun. He didn't do anything. He just walks in, tells you to give him money, and everybody does, and they don't know why they do it.
Back to the Manchurian candidate.
Very strange. And he predicted that long before the event. And he sent me I have the newspaper articles. They cannot catch this guy after 9 bank robberies.
Wow.
No gun, nothing, no getaway car, just walks out.
Well, I do appreciate you answering my question, sir. The event I wanted to relate to you, again, I can't corroborate any of this. It's happened in '88. I was assigned to a unit in Lebanon doing what we do out there. And we were tracking, basically watching the Israelis and the Syrians play their games up around 15,000 feet.
Yes.
And there was a couple of Syrian MiG-21s that were tracking an object that their GCI had ordered them to intercept. And one of the pilots evidently got lost. He turned back. Evidently the flight leader, the more experienced pilot, closed with the target. And I was hearing this secondhand because my specialty is Morse code.
Yes, of course.
Arabic linguist was what kind of relaying this, half on, half off. And he got very agitated at the end. And it took us a while to, he had to work through the translation. But he started describing some type of cylindrical object.
Caller, can you hold on through the break?
Sure thing.
All right, stand by. Very interesting. Closed with what target? With what results? All right, we're going to take a break here at the bottom of the hour. Derrel Sims is my guest. The topic by now should be obvious. I'm Art Bell, and this is Coast to Coast AM.
This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
It is. Good morning, everybody. My guest is Derrel Sims. The topic, alien implants, alien contact, alien abduction. It's on the wild side, but it's real. Real as a heart attack. Back now to Derrel Sims. Derrel?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we've got this very interesting caller. Caller, you want to finish your story? I mean, here we've got something closing with a contact, some sort of cylindrical object. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Well, to cut through a lot of, make a long story short, this Syrian fighter pilot, evidently, he continued to close with this cylindrical object, and he kept describing it. And about 15 minutes after he got visual sighting, he asked permission to engage. Well, there was a lot of hemming and hawing between evidently the headquarters types. But eventually, about 15 minutes later, he's been pacing this thing the entire time. They gave him permission to engage, and he locked on. He got a solid radar lock with one of his missiles, and he released. And 3 seconds after that, he went OTA, which is off the air. I mean, his carrier was gone. I mean, he was out of there. Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because we were plotting where he was on our map, and he was not too far from where we were. So, being that this was broad daylight, by the way. This is like late in the afternoon.
Right.
Okay. So we were waiting for, see like a smoke plume for where this guy was coming down. And we heard, maybe not heard, but you ever feel shell fire or feel vibrations, something hitting very hard?
Oh, yes.
Very close?
Oh, yes.
We felt it. We didn't hear a thing. And we finally did see a smoke plume, which we figured was about 5 clicks away. So we figured, what the hey. We grabbed the Cut V, and we all piled in, leaving a few people behind to sit on the thermite charges for the equipment. And we rolled on over there, keeping an eye out, because, where we were isn't exactly, everybody was going to shoot at us, basically. So they call it a free fire zone. But we rolled over there, and we found what we thought he'd just been shot. So he fired, he got in an engagement, and he was shot down. Mm-hmm. We got closer to the wreckage, and we noticed a lot of odd things, which the main thing was nothing was twisted. The plane had evidently, the smoke we'd seen was from the fuel igniting. It's very difficult to describe. It was like somebody parks the plane and then took it apart bit by bit, and then threw the bits and pieces everywhere. They weren't burned. It wasn't a plane wreck. It wasn't like he hit the ground. It's
like it was taken apart in the air
and then put on the ground. And what we'd seen from the smoke plume was the fuel igniting, because the fuel tanks were exposed.
Right. And
there was JP4 everywhere. And it doesn't take a whole lot for that stuff to go off.
Sure.
And there was exposed electrical equipment, and evidently something had sparked, and that had set the fuel ablaze.
Sure, understandable.
And we found the pilot. And he was Syrian Army officer. He was a major. And he was basically it was like he was asleep. He hadn't punched out. He was not in his chair. He was laying on his back. I mean, it was like he just got out of the plane, laid down, and then he died. I mean, he was dead. This, you know, we
no
kind of
damage to the body.
There was not. It was like I said, it's like he got out, parked the plane, took it apart, and then laid down and died. We couldn't find anything wrong with him. I mean, we took all the we did our job. We took all the the material that we could take.
Sure.
As far as incidentals like books or anything, you know what I'm talking about.
Sure, of course.
But this weirded us out to a very large effect. And
well, listen, I appreciate the story.
Yeah,
one hell of a story. Thank you.
I've never told you. You have this amazing. I've been listening to you about 6 months, and I've been going like, this is pretty wild. And then I didn't expect to get through tonight. And right now I'm. See, as Mr. Sims will aware, you have a fan club, Art, and many organizations with alphabet soup in their names.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Pretty wild story, Derrel.
Yes, we had a situation in which literally 200 conscripts of the Iranian army on the second day of the Iran-Iraq War were all abducted at the same time. Now, these are all professional people, doctors, lawyers, they're all officers. The amazing thing about it is 9 UFOs came over on the second day of the Iran-Iraq War, and they thought that what those things up there were some secret objects that we had craft that we had sold the Iraqis to use against them. So they started firing our Hawk missiles at them, and were not able to hit them.
Good God.
And shortly after that, they abducted all 200 people present. Absolutely amazing case. We're still following it. We have a Iranian general that is confirming some information. I have a case with him I'm working on. He was a major during the time of the Shah of Iran, and he reports, based on interviews that Dr. Lear and I have done with him, that he may have had missing time during the time he was actually trailing a UFO in his airplane.
We are about to go back to war with Iraq. It would appear to be very close. Nobody's going to join us, even Qatar, the small country, and most other Arab countries have declined to participate. But it looks like we're about to go back to war again. With Boris Yeltsin threatening World War III from Russia, the Chinese threatening, we're in a pretty tenuous position and moment in history, Derrel. If there was going to be intervention, you would imagine it would be close.
If we're going to look for intervention, I don't think we're going to find it from a stack of UFOs anywhere. It's going to have to be a little higher than that, in my view.
Okay. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Hi, Art. This is Kathy in Reno.
Yes, Kathy.
Boy, am I happy with you. Mr. Sims, this is truly an honor. I'd like to engage you for just a moment. First, I feel as though every little bit and piece of information I'm already familiar with, like the clown thing.
Yes, ma'am.
And everything you've mentioned, I feel like you and I sat in the same classroom together or something. It's very strange.
When you read my book when it comes out, it's going to absolutely stagger you. There's things in there that people have never even heard of.
Absolutely. I am already staggered. I'm beside myself this morning. Anyway, okay, your conclusions and manner of tracking their intentions,
yes, ma'am,
I think are absolutely logical and by the numbers. You're the first person I've ever heard of who is initiating aggressive intellectual interaction.
Absolutely. Proactive
that is the term.
Absolutely. And it's dangerous, but it's brilliant because it's our only chance to combat and halt this intrusion.
I think it's very dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it is. But it's the only way that we're going to prove ourselves as opponents that will not necessarily allow this to. We will work with you, but don't be taking our babies out of our bedrooms, their bedroom windows at night, you know. I have a question, sir. Okay. Let me see. My brain function has been accelerating for a long time. Art, I'm the one that called last night and asked James about the location, if that was where he found it, and he said yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, along those lines, I've got extreme accelerations. I don't feel like I've ever been abducted.
But do you think that you have a different way of assembling information?
Oh, absolutely. My brain function is, it amazes me because my comprehensive skills are out the window, and I just am constantly being bombarded with information.
All right. This lady, Derrel, called last night, and Ed Dames believes that he has found a Stargate, and she was able to identify the general physical location where he found it. Very, very interesting lady. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Good morning, Art and Mr. Sims.
Hi.
Art, I think you're likening this situation to the Manchurian Candidate may be more prophetic than you know. I want to mention to your audience out there that there's a U.S. News and World Report article of January 24th, 1994 that may be very interesting in this regard. Mr. Sims, when did you cease work from the CIA?
I worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, and I went in the military, and 10 March 68, I got out in 71. I spent a year in Korea. I spent 2 years in the Central Intelligence Agency from 68 to 70.
Okay, because this article here is titled Cold War Guinea Pigs, the Government's Secret Experiments Using Radiation, Mind Control Chemicals, and Drugs on its Citizens. And it goes on in the report, talks about how thousands, possibly thousands of people were worked on by the government under the theory that we needed to because of the Cold War. They were given LSD, electroshocks.
I am familiar with this, and what you're saying is in fact true.
So do you think this could, something that I've just kind of gotten into recently is the whole issue of mind control.
Walter Bowart's work.
A very good movie would be Conspiracy Theory. I think everyone should watch that.
Sure, I've seen it.
But how do you think this could be linked with the whole abduction phenomenon?
You bring up a very good question, and I'd love to address that. First of all, we have several different layers in this abduction business. One of the discussions that Carla Turner and I had many times was the military, quote-unquote, aspect of this. Right. In other words, these people would be abducted, and there would be these guys standing there in military uniforms. And my response to her is, well, I don't doubt that there are things being done in the intelligence community to some people. I said it is a known fact that LSD and other things were used on people, and disease germs were spread over New York City. I mean, these are facts. I mean, the CIA and other groups got sued for this sort of thing. It actually happened. The situation I had with Candy or Carla Turner was this. I said some of the problems I'm having with some of the people with these quote-unquote military guys standing there with their name tags and stripes on or bars or whatever they've got is do you think that anybody in the military would be stupid enough to wear their uniform with a name tag on it if they were going to abduct you and it was going to be a super secret, ultra secret deal?
Only if they thought there'd be no memory.
Well, the thing is that memory can be retrieved. It would seem to me, number one, and because we've seen this with the abduction phenomena with the alien, they will often install the memory of the military people present. I mean, if you want to get your guns off of them and onto someone else, blame somebody else.
Sure.
Because we'll buy that. It doesn't mean that there isn't military people doing this sort of thing, but they just wouldn't be wearing their uniform is what I'm saying.
Can I ask you two questions real quick here? This one may be kind of off the wall. Do you think it's possible that Tim McVeigh could be a Manchurian candidate? And
this I have no idea. I just absolutely have no idea. I've heard this theory before, and I just don't know. I mean, I wouldn't know how to address that.
And number two, do you think we could be set up for some type of massive deception via the whole issue of abductions? And I'll get off the line and listen to your comments.
Okay,
Sure.
The possibility does in fact abduction exist, and if these beings can do strange things to the mind, human mind, therefore abductions may not have ever even occurred. This is entirely possible. The problem I have with that is this. Number one, UFOs are real because they can be seen. If they can be seen, they're reflecting light. If they're reflecting light, they're real. The event is real. You're photographing something real. Often you can photograph, and in one case, in Gulf Breeze, a UFO changed color 118 times in a second and a half. Now, I talked to the expert, Jeff Sino, who studied that photo. The fact is that something is there. Some kind of craft is actually there. The beings are, in fact, really real. I'll be receiving a photograph within a few days, which alleges, and a very good friend of mine says that you'll see a craft here, and you'll also see two beings in it. If that's the case, that would be rather interesting to study to see.
Wait a minute. Something clear enough that you can actually see
the beings sitting inside the craft, apparently. So, and I've got several other photographs I've got some photographs that are just going to blow your mind when you see them in the book, being pictures of the aliens. It is my opinion that what we're going to see, if we ever really, quote unquote, photograph one up close, and we ever get it done, and it can be done, because I've got some techniques that I'm going to work on here very soon. I've got a benefactor that said they would even help finance this project, but I think the beings can actually be photographed. I think you can actually photograph the abduction experience and not even let them know it.
Well, I know people have tried to video record abduction.
It won't work that way. They'll
has.
Spot it every time. You will never film an abduction that way.
My understanding is that generally either the videotape is blank, the machine is turned off, or in some way it never works.
They spot the machine on, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact is they can read, they examine your thinking before they get there, and they know what's in that room because they know what you're thinking and what you've set up.
Then I don't see what chance we have. If they have the ability to manipulate our thinking the way you're suggesting they do,
but they can't do everything. There are holes in their thinking. One of the things that a very important person in the UFO field asked me one time, says, well, I find you very, very controversial. And I said, and what is that, sir? And he says, well, you said that the little grays are not that intelligent. He said, that's outrageous, and I don't see how you could possibly make that kind of a statement. And I said, it's real simple. I said, watch my lips. They're not that intelligent. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen an alien? No. Have you ever seen a UFO? No. Have you ever had a close encounter of first, second, third, or fourth kind? No. Then what qualifies you to tell me anything about an alien? Mm-hmm. I said, I've been there up close and personal. You might say I was a captive audience for about 17 years.
From Frank in Custer, Washington, he says, a hell of a program, Art. One possibility is that we humans might be, to a certain group of aliens, virtually a resource, just like everything else on the planet. Simply a resource. Could we be that to them?
This is possible. I think the thing that we need to be looking at, I think the implant thing is certainly a serious thing, whatever they may be. But I think what's really important is that we need to find out what this breeding business is. Everybody has different ideas about that. I don't really care what the theories are. I really care about what the data really will suggest. And let me preface that by saying this, that when I talk about these screensaver memories, this illustration I use on your computer, we have found as many as 3 layers of screensavers before we ever really got to the real memory of what happened in that event. And that individual did not know the difference between any of those 3. And if the hypnotist doesn't know that, he'll go to 1 or go to 2 or the 3rd or whatever, and whatever he pulls out, he'll consider that the big one.
Derrel, there's a lot of very strange behavior in modern society. Really strange, unaccountable behavior. How can we know that it isn't the result of repeated abduction and instilled memory? Manchurian candidate stuff.
That's a frightening aspect, and I certainly hope that it is not the case. There are situations that do bother me. One such situation is a case I had
well, the caller mentioned Oklahoma City. I mean, that's just one.
Well, that's just one.
I'll tell you what. Hold on. We're at the top of the hour again. Derrel Sims is my guest. You want to know about Derrel Sims? Go up to my website, click on his name, and take a look at his top secret clearance, now converted to secret. Just so you know who you're listening to, I'm Art Bell. This is Coast to Coast AM.
This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. Now again, here's Art.
I wonder how you fight somebody who can control what you see and perceive. Derrel Sims says you can. It's hard for me to understand. We're going to try to reserve this hour away for you and Derrel Sims. Derrel, are you there?
I am here.
All right. You think you can make it through the hour?
Not a problem.
All right. Here they come. First-time caller line. You're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
This is Rick from Fresno, California.
Yes, sir. KFRE.
Yes. Outstanding show tonight.
Thank you.
My one question to Mr. Sims is not discounting the creation theory with God and not not discounting that, but what is his opinion that maybe we were seeded here, brought from another place,
right?
Seeded, and now the results of the abductions and everything are just basically results of them checking up on us and following up on the research to see how we're progressing as a whole.
Well, I think it's an interesting thought, and I think these are type things that we need to ask. Obviously, my response to that is simply that there are a number of things that we need to be looking at. One is what exactly is happening. In other words, things are too simple. I mean, we're finding them doing thousands of the same basic procedures on people over and over and over. I mean, either you're so slow you can't get it, or that's not what you're really doing. But that's what we're supposed to think you're doing.
Right.
There's so much deception involved in this stuff that you try to keep this logical mind about it. We'll just do this and do that, and you'll find these logical things will happen. It'll all be science. It'll just be higher science, right?
But just not always
and
true.
It just isn't gelling out to be that.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that.
Well, I appreciate your saying that. I'm wary of people who have answers for everything, Derrel. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Good morning.
Good morning.
Where are you, sir?
I'm in Everett, Washington. My name's Jeff.
All right, Jeff.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions for you. One of them, Derrel, you mentioned you're a Christian, and I'm wondering, have you been a Christian for a long time, or
since I was 6 years old?
Since you were 6 years old.
That's correct.
Because I've recently read a book by a gentleman named Chuck Messler.
Yes.
Alien Encounters, I believe it is.
I know the book.
And one of his claims was that a Christian cannot be abducted, which
that is not true.
Okay.
That is not an accurate
I thought
statement.
the same thing too. And I've recently had some experiences in my dreams, and I too am a Christian. Which led me to believe that perhaps he was wrong. I'm not going to go into that, but
of course, it's not the place to argue it. But
what I'd like to back to Genesis 6 when it talks about the B'nai Elohim and the Nephilim. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, I am very familiar with it.
Okay, and back into Jude.
Okay, well, I guess we lost him. He was about to talk, though, about the Nephilim.
The genetic engineering that occurred there, and it is significant that not only did the beings that fell, and Sitchin uses the term the ones who came down, but that's not the actual Hebrew term. It means the ones who fell. I mean, they were thrown out, is what it means. And these, if you take the biblical position, which I do, that these beings were thrown out, they came here, they apparently interbred with women and produced giants. That was just the first genetic offspring that occurred. This occurred actually after the children of Israel went over to the land of Canaan. They found the giants also there. They found several races of them. But my point is this. If you follow that story further over into Isaiah, you'll find that when these giants were drowned out by the flood and so on, and killed off and so on, they did not, in the Christian thinking and Arabs and others, many of them feel the same way, when you die you go to heaven or hell or whatever. The Nephilim, the races of giants or those that were interbred, they didn't go anywhere. They stayed here. And this is kind of answers some of the questions some of these people are bringing up.
Mm-hmm.
These are the demonic spirits that people talk about. The demons are not the aliens. It says that the Raphaim, which is it's a generic term for the Nephilim, the Raphaim should not rise in the resurrection simply because they're already here. They didn't go anywhere. They're still here. And those are, in fact, the cases of demon possession you find. That is not mental illness or anything like that. I saw 2 bona fide cases of demon possession in Korea. I never saw anything like it. I took a senior course in psychology my freshman year. Out of 18 different areas of psychopathology, they didn't fit any of them. So that's maybe that'll help answer some of that.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Good morning.
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Mr. Sims? Hello. I, when I was a child, had an experience that I believe was a UFO, the close encounter of the first kind, with my uncle, who has since passed on. And since that time, I've seen them numerous times under a variety of different circumstances. But I haven't had any what I would consider missing time except for that very first time. I can't remember anything immediately before or after that first occurrence that I saw. And I was wondering if there was any way that you could tell for any...
I will be glad to help you and answer that question. Here's what you need to do. The very first thing. You ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here's what you do. One is you either email Derrel, D-E-R-R-E-L, at Holman.net, HOLMAN.net, or you call the number 281-587-5455, and on there you'll also get my personal number, and you can talk to me directly if you call. My phone bills are over $1,000 a month now, and so I will call people back, but on their dime, and talk to them as long as they want about this. But on there you can request or call me on the internet and request our abduction forms, and I will be glad to get those to you.
Boy, are you going to be busy.
Yes, I will, and that's what I do. I'm looking for cases with physical evidence or cases where people can do something about their phenomena or choose to.
All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Good morning. Hello there.
Yes.
Okay, well, I guess whoever it was, we lost him. First-time caller line, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Hi, Art.
Hello.
This is Spike up in St. Paul.
Yes, Spike.
And I've got a couple of questions. About 8 or 9 months ago, you had a couple of gentlemen on your program. One of them was losing his memory, and his buddy there was deciphering for him. And you had talked about the moon, but somehow the question never got answered.
I'm not recalling, I'm afraid, what you're talking about.
Last week, you went back to the moon, and this was said somehow, either don't come back to the moon or don't go back to the moon.
All right.
I was wondering what in the devil has happened because we haven't traveled up there.
All right. He's referring to a NASA announcement that was made back on the 9th, a memo indicating that funding for all manned projects, manned spaceflight, off-planet, beyond low Earth orbit, had been canceled. That's what he's referring to.
If we take this gentleman's position, it wouldn't be a wise thing to do because if we're not going to the moon anyway, we should be stealing the money somehow. I think that's the indication. So that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Hi, Art. My name's George, and I'm from Ohio.
Hello, George.
And I was abducted when I was 5 years old. That I remember. I didn't remember, but it was brought up in hypnosis. And again in 1967 at a military installation in the desert in California. And when we were returned, we reported, or I did, maybe I was the only one taken, was the only thing I could figure, reported it to my platoon sergeant, and I was informed that he and other people out there had seen these things, that this place was Hunter Liggett Military Reservation in California, the Mojave Desert.
Right. For
a UFO, it would be a stone throw from Area 51. And I was told to keep my mouth shut, and I said no, I wanted it on record. And it was put on record with my knowledge that if I didn't keep my mouth shut, I'd go to the psycho ward, which I did. And then I was drummed out of the service. But anyway, when I was on this thing, there was 5 of them. I encountered what I took to be an angel or a deity of some type or sort because of the way I was just overwhelmed with abundant love, and this thing was just so radiant. It was a light source, and I've heard that's the way angels come sometime as an energy source or a form of energy. And I just wondered what your guest, if he's heard anything about these things, and if he'd like to contact me later, he can do so.
Well, actually, the other way around, you can contact him. We're hearing a lot of that, and I'm still pretty mixed up internally, Derrel, I've got to tell you, with regard to the spiritual side of this. Very mixed up about this.
My general information for people, if they're Christian, there's one of the statements that they need to know if they're having abductions is greater is he that is in you than is in the world. And for them, they'll understand that.
Yeah, but
for people who are not, they're going to have to find something that will benefit them or help them if they want these abductions to stop.
But spiritual things don't leave implants in ears and hands and feet.
Oh, this is true.
Spiritual things don't fly around in crafts that can be photographed.
I think you're right on the money. I think where a lot of people are messed up on this issue is they're confusing demons, which are very real in my view, for the alien. The alien is not a demon. It is something very real and very well used of whatever's going on, of whatever's behind it. And what all that is yet, I don't know. That's what the investigative part that's still working. But as far as I think a lot of people are confusing some of these issues, and one of them is, and a good illustration of this, many abductees will report that they were overwhelmed by love of the being next to the gray being or the doctor type that was standing next to them.
Right.
And if you get someone that really knows what they're doing hypnotically, and it doesn't have to be hypnosis. I mean, there are different ways to do this. You don't need hypnosis to do this sort of thing. You can recover a lot of good memory without hypnosis at all, if you know what you're doing. But basically, this is a program that the being will put his eye, large black eye, right next to your face, next to your eye, and in about a quarter of a second, he'll program that entire event. And that's what you'll be left with.
Oh, that's so
the problem is you don't know what really happened.
Yeah.
You don't know.
All right.
It's another screen.
All right. Here's somebody who wants to go back a little bit in the program. Derrel, at age 17, was able to stop his abductions. It ended violently. What did he actually do to accomplish this? In other words, describe that last abduction experience.
Well, the last abduction experience I've never told anybody. That's why the lady that I gave the post-hypnotic suggestion to, when she told me, described my last event, why I stood there with my hair straight up. And the reason is because no one knows about that event, and my wife doesn't even know the details of it. And yet this woman described every aspect of it. And I even asked her, is it, because you think you're psychic or what? And she said, no. She said, I just overheard what they were thinking. So in my event, and all of my events from me personally, and as I keep saying this, if I could do resist to some degree this at 4 years old. You can do it at 40. It can be done.
Derrel, in what manner was it violent? Can you tell us that?
The last event that occurred, the 5 beings were there. Literally, and this is why people say, well, it must have been a bad dream or something. No, because the lock on the door was broken after they left, and they left a physical object, which I will report about in the book, of course, and which I still have. And the remarkable thing about the event is I was physically picked up and violently thrown around, and the event was just absolutely horrific. I went to my girlfriend the next night, and it started to get dark, and I became so phobic I couldn't stand it. I mean, you just know they're coming back.
Yeah.
And I went and told my girlfriend I just thought the world of her, and she's as fine a lady as you ever want to meet. And she looked at me, and of course, you got to realize you're telling somebody about abduction no one knew what abduction was back then. Nobody knew. This is back in the 60s.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm telling her the truth, Marta. I said, I've got to tell you something. This is imperative that you understand, and it's important that you believe me. This just kills abductees to do this. You go out, you live the secret life. You can't tell anybody, and then you do, and then you get this. And she looked at me and said, you've had this terrible, terrible dream. That was her first mistake. Second thing she did was take me to the guy who I was doing scientific anomaly studies, which included UFO work when I was 16. And he listened to the story, and he said, Derrel, he said, when they land, they're going to land on the White House lawn and give the president some kind of gift to study life from another world. And this man's a psychologist. I said, my friend, I said, it isn't going to happen that way. I saw the movie, and it's not going to work like that. Whatever it is that we think these beings are, or whatever it is we think that's going to happen, it's not going to be anything like we ever dreamed. And whatever they're doing and whatever they did to me, I suspect they've done to others.
I'm sure you're right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Good morning.
Hi, Art.
Yes.
This is Joe from Weckers.
Do the wild thing at 702-727-1295.
That's it, huh? West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hello.
Hi, Art. Hi, Derrel.
Okay.
Hello.
Where are you?
I'm in Phoenix.
All right.
I guess I want to tell you what happened to me. About 4 years ago, I had an encounter where I went to sleep Friday night, woke up Saturday morning completely paralyzed from the waist down, and I had a nosebleed. Anyway, for a week, I could not walk. I could not move. Well, I could move, but I had to crawl to the bathroom, and it was a real traumatic experience. But during that week, I had like a series of dreams or flashbacks, and the first one was I was shot up into a spaceship.
All right, caller, you want to hold on for a moment? We are at the bottom of the hour. We'll be right back. This is Coast to Coast AM.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them blue for me and you.
This is Coast to Coast AM from the Kingdom of Nye with Art Bell.
It is, and abduction is a very difficult topic. It's one of those things that if you have experienced it, you have no question. Well, yes, you do. You have lots of questions, but you know that something really happened to you. And with a number of people who are reporting this now, it deserves a very, very serious investigation, and that is what Derrel Sims is doing. Derrel Sims was CIA. Derrel, just as a matter of curiosity, everybody would ask this, so I will. Why should we trust anybody who was in the CIA?
Well, it's a good question. number one, I don't think everybody in the CIA is bad. In fact, most of the people in the CIA are people like secretaries and that sort of thing. I mean, they're just normal people.
Sure.
The so-called 007 types and so on that do the various different things. And yes, I did meet some assassins while I was there. They actually did exist. Yeah. The Cold War has changed a lot of things during that time, and then a lot has changed since then. The thing that troubles me, and there again, you know, it'd be kind of stupid for me to tell you I was spying on you and then come out here and even try it, especially when I'm out here talking because I believe we need an intelligence community. I think that's a necessary thing. I think it's gotten so big, it's so out of hand that it's violating every right that we have right now. This whole thing is so out of hand. We better stop it. And you worry about aliens. I'm more worried about that sort of thing. I mean, they own the internet. I guarantee you, they can. They say, well, do they tap my phones? They can listen to you without the phone being lifted.
I know.
They can do anything. They have technology that's your tax dollars pay for that black budget stuff. They have everything they need, and you better not be the alien you be worried about. You better worry about people doing stuff like that to you, taking the very rights right out from under your own Constitution.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Good morning.
Good morning, Art. How you guys doing today?
We're all right.
Or this morning or whatever it is. All right, hey, I've got this, I've managed to wake up one morning in the middle of like a kind of a bizarre dream, and I actually made some sketches and took some notes down. It was really kind of I don't know, where should I start here? All right, I made a little sketch of the room. It was a strange laboratory-type setting with a blue luminescent lights, kind of like Tesla's high-frequency discharges, his rendered intensely luminous like wires and stuff like that. And what happened is there was like first notes here I've got are left brain angel and right brain angel scans. There was a mold of my skull, a strange scan of a skeletal structure, blueprints of existing form of my body in this type of thing. And what kind of struck me the most, I mean, I made the most notes about it. This was back in about 95 or so. And it was a left and right angel scan of brain. And there was an out-of-the-ordinary request by one of the subordinate entities. And anyway, they went through with like a standard type of probe that was to no avail, and I guess that stimulated the out-of-the-ordinary type request. And it was just, what I'm kind of getting at here is I'm curious about who's out there and who's had like just the dream type stuff. I don't think I've actually been taken up anywhere or anything like that.
All right.
What happened on the mental plane?
Right. That sparks a very good question. That is how one is to decide the difference between a dream and an abduction, other than physical evidence, Derrel. What is there?
The difference in there are things that show up differently in dreams and abduction scenarios or encounters. Not everyone is abducted. That's confronted by and I love the term this guy used, entity. That's a good term.
Right.
I have no idea what an alien is. I haven't the slightest clue. If we use the term alien, we'd have to decide that that's anything that's not native to this planet per se, that's currently here.
Right.
If that's the case, that would be if you're, as most religions of the world believe in angels, the angels would be aliens in that sense. So entity is an excellent term because it leaves it open because we really don't know what these particular beings are. They may be something in between a bunch of other things. We don't know.
They may be, but again, how do you delineate between what was a dream and what is real? Only physical evidence?
Physical evidence is the best thing for me. For other people or in their particular events, there are other things that can also help and assist them in that. Number one is generally you don't smell things in dreams.
That's true.
There are certain senses, and there are ways to check these people. Of course, the problem is it takes enormous amounts of time to do this. But there are techniques that we use consciously, not hypnotically, but consciously, which can determine whether people are hallucinating or not in different levels. And this is good.
Take the experiences, for example, told by Whitley Strieber. How would you class them?
The events that Whitley had in his early, in his beginnings, I think he reported those as true and as honest as he possibly could. The events, and I don't know all of the events that he had, and I've not read all his material, but a
lot of them were very negative.
Yes, they were, and there again, this is what he recalls in the beginning, and it seems to me, there again, I would be completely guessing here, but we do see abduction events where the individual will start off with very negative events, and they'll end up positive. And what's happened when you work with this person, there again, it depends on who's doing the work. If you study that person, and I'll give an example of this, you'll find that many times that the person's finally at some phase, they've fallen under the spell, so to speak, and they now accept the screensaver. A case in point, one of the top psychics in this country, or at least in their viewpoint, asked me to do the hypnotic work on them in reference to their abduction. Mm-hmm. My response was, why in the world would you want a piece of trash like me doing that sort of thing if you're getting information from the inner planes and inner dimensions and all kinds of stuff, and all kinds of super beings are telling you everything? What in the world would you want somebody like me doing any kind of work with you? And they said, please just do it anyway. And I said, the agreement is this. If you will admit to whatever we find is true, if we find it's the interdimensional beings, then that's what we'll both say. If it's something else, we'll say that. The answer was, I agree. Long story short, as soon as I knew that person was in memory, popped them into the event, bang, they were on a table with 17 other little girls getting gynecological exams. Screaming and crying. She says, but I don't understand. They never told me any of this. And we talked there for a long time, and finally the lady said, cried and says, why don't tell me what's going on? And I said, it's not my business to tell you. That's up to you to decide. I can't make you an abductee or not one. I mean, that's not my business. We're good friends. Tell me what happened. And I said, well, it just is a personal thought, and that's all. And she says, what's that? And I said, I think the beings that are from the inner planes telling you all the amazing information. She said, yeah. And I said, it's them. It always has been.
A lot of women who have been abducted have been shown what seems to be, or they are told, are their offspring, their children.
This is true. I can comment to that and tell you some rather remarkable things. My prediction, as I did with the implant business, I'm going to tell you some predictions I think we're going to find in this arena when we finally get our act together. Mm-hmm. First of all, you're going to find, and I have one lady that is agreed to go through the entire process because she claims she's getting impregnated every year. Well, the problem is she has her tubes tied and has been checked by a gynecologist, and there's no problem, but she still gets pregnant every year. And then that fetus disappears in the first trimester.
Right.
Which is the same story you hear. My response to her was the following. The doctors who are going to examine you are not going to believe any of this abduction business, and I don't want them to. It's not important. They're just going to look at the evidence. And what we're going to find, in my opinion, is once a test is done, we can't tell who the father is, but we can tell who it isn't.
That's true.
I said, so what we're going to do is find out your husband's not the daddy. Well, that's not going to surprise these doctors. But what's really going to happen, if we can get to that fetus before they come to get it, and we can do an amniocentesis, we're going to find out that probably you're not the mommy. That's the sugar. You're just the incubator.
Boy.
I said, they're using the eggs and sperm of other people.
I understand. And just using her in tubes tied or not wouldn't matter. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Hi. Didn't expect to get through, so was a little nervous here. My story is I woke up one morning and I woke up with a nosebleed, completely paralyzed from the waist down.
Sounds just like another one we just heard about.
And the caller before me really freaked me out when he started explaining some of the details. The same details were in my dream or whatever occurrence it was.
That's more than a dream. If you wake up paralyzed from the waist down with a nosebleed, that's more than a dream.
I didn't know what it was, but
the physical evidence of your event suggests something else. I mean, I don't know that you didn't get up and fall and hurt yourself or whatever, but what I'm saying is, and I agree totally with Art here, that something else has happened there. It's not just a dream.
The Lake County abduction video on UPN, Derrel, even though it was a staged event,
yes,
did they have most of what occurs during abduction down about right?
Actually, I have not even seen the video, so I can't comment in that.
You still haven't seen it?
Still have not seen it. All I've seen is an attorney, and he likes the video real well.
Does he?
Yes.
It'll be interesting.
What he likes is that he thinks that they're not going to be able to stand in court. That's what he thinks. So he likes the video beautifully.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what they do when they re-air it. First-time caller line, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Yes, Art?
Yes.
I've got a question. I had, this is kind of amazing. I was 7 or 8, and this was in 1957 or 58. We had 2 people who used to appear in our room and just look at us. And I would sit up and be completely wide awake. And about 7, 8 years ago, my brother come back from Nevada to visit, and he goes, you know, Pat, the aliens live in our closet. I never knew he'd seen these people. And I used to be afraid of that room. So we moved downstairs into a little offshoot from a living room, and I woke up, and I was sitting up just wide awake, and a guy stepped into the entryway of this large doorway with a military uniform on, and I got scared, so I screamed, and my folks came out and stuff. And that was in, like, 58 or whatever it was. And then in 1969, I was in Texas. And I was kind of into auras and energies at that time. And this same person that came into my room in that military uniform come around a corner of the booth and pulled his hands apart, and so you could see this light. And I got back to Minnesota here, and I was sleeping upstairs just staying at my folks, and I was totally, I could think clear as a bell, but I couldn't move. And I was just going to have my brother pull my legs out so I could relax better, and I couldn't speak or anything, and I says, just get the hell off me. And 3 lights came into my room and circled, and then I woke. I mean, I could move again.
Well, again, you know, you should be going through some sort of a regression to find out what really happened to you. The stories, Derrel, are endless and seem very similar, don't they?
Yes, they do. I've seen a gentleman in Brazil. He showed me a book he had of 179 different kinds of aliens. He had studied for over 30 years in Brazil. He said, what do you think of my work? And I said, well, can I be blunt? And he said, yes. And I said, most of them are all the same guy. He said, what are you saying? I said, look at the beings. I said, every one of them have got one thing in common. He said, what's that? And I said, look at them. He said, oh, God, they all got black eyes.
Yep.
I said, that's my whole point, bud. I said, you don't know what these people have seen. And they don't either.
Wildcard line, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Good morning.
Morning. This is Evan in Phoenix.
Yes, sir.
Derrel, I think you're doing a great job, and I was fascinated when you said you were able to actually have one of your people give thoughts to the aliens.
That's happened several times.
And I guess I'd like to suggest maybe this, I don't know how dangerous this would be, but maybe trying to actively read the thoughts of the aliens. Because if someone can overhear them thinking, then I would say maybe their strength in programming us is probably also their weakness, and that they have an opening into that process.
Brilliant. See, it's this type of thinking we need to be thinking about. We need to look at this thing from every direction. It's like a multi-dimensional cube you're looking at.
Right.
It's not a square. Here's one side, or it's a two-sided thing. It's this or it's that, and it's nothing ever. It's multi-dimensional, and we need to be the same way.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for the call, and take care. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hi.
Good morning, Rick and Mississauga. You mentioned physical attributes to an encounter.
Absolutely.
And during a dream, what about if you wake up and your stomach has gone away, and that's the reason that you wake up, because you've either fallen off a cliff, ridden off a cliff or accelerating upwards in an elevator or accelerating downwards in an elevator, that sort of thing?
Well, what we've had in some of the abduction scenarios, the reason some of the people knew that something physically really happened is they were actually dropped on their bed. When they have a water bed, that tends to shake, and it really wakes you up big time.
Oh, it definitely does.
You're still sloshing around, and you can't figure out why is the bed flopping up and around you, as if you had been dropped from a height of 4 or 5 feet.
Now, see, that's happened to me in my sleep. Boom! You're just, it's like you're dropped. Exactly. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Derrel Sims. Hello.
Good morning, Arthur.
Good morning.
Derrel?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the Magic Christian in Ventura, California.
Hey, here we go.
Hey, Derrel, I was going to ask you hadn't brought it up in your appearance here tonight, if you had done a chain reference on the Sons of the Giant.
Did
you do a chain reference study of the Sons of the Giant?
Oh, yes.
Because you haven't mentioned that in the 20th chapter of 1 Chronicles, the 6th verse, there's a 6-fingered being described there.
Oh, I believe me, I understand this.
With his kill.
We would have to do a whole show just on that on that area.
Right. Okay, moving on. I, too, just finished Chuck Missler's book, Alien Encounters, not too long ago.
Yes.
And I understand your problem with Chuck's description that indwelt with the Holy Spirit believers cannot be abducted. I do think, though, that that's one of the reasons that you've heard the reports of angels, because he said that he would place his holy angels in charge over thee.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
well, I think one of the ways to best address this is from a Christian point of view, because a lot of people don't understand this because they keep saying, well, you must not have really been a Christian if you got abducted.
That's not true.
We have people, we have children, I have cases of children 2 months old being taken. I mean, these people have never made any decision one way or the other about anything.
But I also have a problem, Derrel, with your flat-out statement that these beings are not demons, because it's evidence in the Scriptures that all kinds of flesh can be inhabited by a demon.
Why would a demon abduct a 2-month-old child?
To do harm. That's his job.
What about the ones that don't do harm?
Well, if they're not involved in actual harm to humans, then their role is deception.
Okay. Well, I understand the demon part of it. And believe me, I understand that. But what we're dealing with here is something that is not demonic. I'm not saying that they're good or their intentions to me are very questionable. I don't care who they are. But what we're dealing with here, and there again, we don't have time to go through anything like this here. But if you want to email me and talk to me on email at Derrel@Hallman.net, I guarantee I'll be glad to debate the issue with you, and we've got a lot of things in common. I'd love to discuss it with you.
All right, and also you give out your phone number as well.
Okay, my phone number is going to be 281-587-5455. That's 281-587-5455.
That's answered 24 hours a day.
24, and I do return calls.
Okay, well, you've got a lot of talking ahead of you, Derrel, because this is a gigantic topic.
Yes,
I mean, it's just immense. So I thank you for spending the hours you have with us, and we'll do another program.
That's great, and if you want to do that in the near future, I've got a gentleman that has some inside information on the incredible satellite information that will, I think, actually prove our abduction phenomena.
All right, and I know you've got some photographs on the way as well.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to that one with the aliens that can be seen inside the craft. Is there any chance? Can you get that to us when you get it?
I will have to get permission from them. First of all, I want to verify it and see if it's even real. And
all right.
Second, we'll get permission to see what we can do there.
Good, Derrel. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's it, folks. Good night, all. We'll see you tomorrow night when Jack